Well, after about a week at sea since we left the Bahamas, we've arrived at our first European port. So, where in the world are we?
We are in the city of Punta Delgado on the island of São Miguel in the Azores. The Azores are a group of islands, an archipelago actually, formed by volcanic and plate movement and all that good stuff off the coast of Portugal. The Azores are actually protected by Portugal, but they are not subjected by Portugal. So they are independent, but they are under a protectionist treaty with Portugal.
Yeah. Well, fun facts about the volcanic islands here. There are a few mountains that are over a mile high, and if you count the height of the mountain from the sea floor all the way to the top of the mountain, they're some of the highest mountains in the whole world. But obviously, just a little bit of them is sticking out of the ocean. As with most cruise ships, we're only here in port for the day. We scheduled an excursion for later this afternoon to hit some hot springs and a botanical garden, but that doesn't leave for a few hours, so we figured we'd get off the ship and we'd just wander around the city and see what we can find.
You guys, I think I found my new calling. Look at this. These trees in this park are wrapped in crochet. Hi guys, so we have decided to take a couple minutes out of our morning and get on a hop on hop off train. You'll find these all over Europe. They're awesome. This is €8 for a 50-minute tour of the city and the immediate surroundings. And they're going to give us first the information in Portuguese and then in English. The driver told us, so that'll be great. A lot of times what you'll find is they have little earpieces that you put in. If you turn the dial to the language that you want, I know the ones that we did in Italy and in various places last summer had that option, but this is going to be just the driver giving us the tour in the tube. So we'll let you know how that goes.
Ponta Delgada is situated in the south coast of São Miguel, and it started as a small settlement in the 15th century. It only became a city in 1546. All the names of the streets and the different places in Ponta Delgada are connected to the history, mostly of the island. Coming from the Algarve in the southern part of Portugal. The well-known custos podem ver regulados nesta cidade.
So we're here at a cafe, which in typical European style means you get coffee or alcohol and probably a little bite to eat, right on the waterfront in São Miguel. And so I actually ordered a hard apple cider. Summersby is the brand name of it. And
I got a Super Bock, which is a Portuguese beer, which I've tried a little bit of already. Is pretty good.
yeah, this cider is really actually delicious.
And we got a tuna sandwich, which seems to be a popular item at some of the local cafes. And we'll talk to you afterwards, let you know how it all was. Yeah, we just finished our quick snack / lunch that we had at the cafe there. Forgot to mention that it cost us €10.45, so not too expensive. Not the cheapest place in the world, but much cheaper
Right,
than...
but that was for 2 drinks and a sandwich that we split. And it was a pretty hearty sandwich, like it was like a 3-layer bread kind of thing.
Yeah, and the tuna was like the freshest tuna I've ever had in
for
my
real,
life.
like that did not come out of a can.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that, in our future travels, if you guys would like to buy us a drink, I'm going to provide a link in the description down below. It's technically buy us a coffee, but I can't guarantee you I'm going to be buying a coffee. It might go towards a beer, might go towards a glass of wine, or even a Monster, which is my favorite, drink to get me going in the morning. Felicia might buy a coffee, but
I'll definitely buy a coffee because European coffee is my favorite. But he'll probably buy a Monster. He doesn't even drink coffee. That's why we don't trust him, actually.
but anyway, if you'd like to buy us a drink, the link will be in the description down below. Thanks. All right, we've started on our tour of the island. It's supposed to be about 4 hours long. Our first stop that we didn't even know, I don't think, that was going to be part of the tour was at a tea factory, which is here behind us. It's Sunday today, so it's closed, but we got to walk through and see some of the machinery. Relatively simple. I think they just dry it and shred it and bag it and whatnot, but it's a very beautiful location. I'll rotate the camera around here and you can see we're right here on one of the shores of the island. I believe the North Shore, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I think so too. One thing too that we didn't mention before is like a general European unwritten rule is that most things are closed on Sundays. So anytime that you're visiting a place on Sunday, you're not going to see it in full motion. You're not going to see all the stores open. Like the factory's not running today because it's Sunday, so we weren't able to see the factory in motion. But we're going to head into the store over here where we can have some tea samples and check out some of the teas that they grow here and that they offer all packaged up and ready to go.
Over here you can see hydrangeas. You see thousands of them, you see millions of them.
All right, we've arrived at our second stop of our tour of São Miguel Island, and this is Furnace Volcano.
Yeah, so like fun fact, all of the volcanoes on the island are actually active but dormant. So it's not like it's going to erupt today, but it has the potential.
We hope not.
Yeah, we hope not. It does have the potential to erupt, sometime in the next decades or so. But it makes for some really cool use of geothermal heat. That they have geothermal power plants throughout the area, as well as hot springs and mud lakes and those kind of things that are spa quality type things.
Yeah, it's actually been, according to our tour guide, almost 400 years since the volcano that we're at right now has erupted. It's been a little over 200 years. There's 3 volcanoes total on this island, but another one erupted a little over 200 years ago. But like I said, almost 400 years since the one behind us erupted. So like I said, hopefully not today.
Not today. So one thing that we've learned on our tour is that there are actually more cows on this island than there are people. There are about 150,000 people on the island, but that is exceeded by the number of cows. The largest industry here on the island is dairy. There are some beef cows and chickens and those kind of things as well, but for the most part, the cows that are used here on the island provide dairy to not just here, but the surrounding areas, including Portugal, mainland Portugal itself too. But another cool thing, everywhere around the island you see hydrangea bushes that look like this. This is kind of a small one compared to a lot of the ones that we've seen. Sometimes they're 7 or 8 or 9 feet tall. And interesting thing, they're not native to the island. They are native to Japan and Korea, so they were brought here. But it was found that the volcanic soil and the climate really was friendly to this particular plant. So they started using them actually in the fields as natural fences because the cows don't like the smell of them and they will not cross them. You guys, this is so wild. Look behind us. This is Caldera, the area, the cauldron. So this is where the volcanic geothermal heat is actually heating up the water. It is actually boiling the water behind us. You can see the bubbles in the water and you can see the steam rising off it. Our tour guide just told us, if it's bubbling and it looks like it's hot, don't touch it. Like, it seems like a common sense kind of thing, but I can see people going, oh, that looks so cool, let's touch it.
And I think I wasn't sure at first why we bothered to stop at a tea factory, but if you combine these, you got your tea earlier, we have some boiling water behind us, you can go ahead and get yourself some tea.
We should have gotten ourselves a little box of tea while we were there, but I think we missed an opportunity.
We did.
We will go to La Francia. Back to the pier. That's where we
Oh yeah, I'm just not going to climb that hill again.
So you guys saw that we just did try some of the mineral water. It's cold, not the hot water, obviously. But our guide was telling us that there are 17 different chemical compositions of carbonated water in this area. And that tastes like flat seltzer water. Like, the carbon is so completely present in it, it's not even refreshing because all you can taste is like the carbon. That's crazy. Okay, so it's the beginning of sweet corn season here, and this is roasted kind of in a wet, like the water from here sort of thing, and then the guy peels it right in front of you. It was only €1.50, so we're gonna give it a try. I'll let you know how it is. Let's see. It's good. Not super sweet. Not really what I expected.
Yep.
But it's
Very good.
Yeah.
And we've arrived at our final destination of today's tour. We're at a botanical garden. I cannot remember the name of it, but it's supposedly one of, or actually I think the largest one.
The biggest one in the Azores, yeah.
Yeah, which we're going to walk through some of the trails here, but it gives us a chance to share some of the history that we've learned about the island. And let's start with plants, appropriate here for the botanical garden. Our tour guide told us that a lot of the plants that are here on the island were brought in by the Portuguese and other settlers, things that they wanted to grow or plants that they thought would be good for building materials and so forth.
One really big crop on the island is pineapples. They are not native to here, and they actually have to be grown in a greenhouse, because even though the soil, the volcanic soil, is perfect for them, the climate is actually too cold for them. So they have like plantations of just greenhouses full of pineapples.
And I know another species they brought in was a Japanese cedar tree, which they use for building material, and it's the climate here, the amount of moisture and the temperatures supposedly are ideal for it. And as you may or may not know, cedar trees are actually really good for pest control and keeping animals out of whatever you're building. Which brings us to our next topic, is animals and what animals are native here to the island. So our tour guide told us there are a lot of birds, obviously, because they migrate, but I believe we're about 1,500 kilometers or so from Portugal itself, so way too far for any kind of animal to swim across. So there are just small animals that I think were mostly brought in probably by the settlers. I think the tour guide said the largest animal that you'll actually find here is a bunny rabbit.
Yep. Bunnies in the wild, the largest wild animal that you'll find here. Yeah.
Right. There's obviously, we talked a little bit earlier about cows, which are probably the largest animal, but they are not running wild, of course. And one of the smaller animals that you'll find around here is a mouse. I've been hunting through the gardens here for a little mouse with a Viking helmet on it, but so far hasn't been successful. And the reason I mentioned that Viking helmet is because there's a little bit of a disagreement about who settled this island first. In recent history, dating back to the 1400s, is when the Portuguese first started settling these islands. They didn't settle all 9 of them at the same time. They were settled over, many, many years, but it was pretty much predominantly Portuguese that settled the islands, and there were other no native humans to these islands or living in these islands when they got here. But supposedly there were signs that there might have been people living here previously. There are some like hollowed out caves that don't look like nature could have done it, that man-made caves that were hollowed out at some point, either as a burial site or maybe to store grains or something along those lines, but there were no humans remaining. So actually just recently, within the last couple years, they did a study of the mice that are native to the island here.
Olive tree.
And they tested the DNA of the mice, and they actually discovered that they are Viking mice. They have Norse DNA. Whatever species is native to that area of the world, so it must have been Vikings.
Yeah.
Came here many, many years ago and probably brought mice with them. Not intentionally on the ship, they escaped on the island, so that's probably who originally settled the island many years ago. To continue on a little bit with the history, as I said, it was the Portuguese who most recently settled the islands in the late 1400s. ownership of the islands has passed back and forth between the Portuguese and the Spanish, as if you know much about history, they have fought many times in many wars over the years. So I don't want to go into the details and the history of that, but just to suffice it to say, it's the Portuguese people who have lived here, but who actually legally own the island has been handed back and forth a number of times.
Also, Portuguese is the official language of the Azores, but everybody just about that we've run into also speaks English. So if you're a tourist, don't be discouraged by the fact that maybe you don't know Portuguese.
And in more recent history, these islands still belong to the country of Portugal, but they have actually become an autonomous region. There are 2 autonomous regions that currently belong to Portugal, the other one being Madeira, that we're going to visit in a couple days. So we'll bring you more information about that once I study up on it.
And for a brief period of time, like so many other things during the Spanish high ages, the Spanish occupied the island and claimed it to be theirs, and then it was returned through a series of conflicts back to Portugal, and something known as the Portuguese Restoration. So, when I think about that, I think of the Meiji Restoration, kind of bringing everything back to the way it traditionally was. So I have a feeling that's really similar to what's happening on this island as well.
Yeah, and as I said, it's an autonomous region, so they still are a part of Portugal, but they are self-governing. They have their own representative in the European Union, and they have a number of representatives in the Portuguese Parliament, and they control their own government locally, but they still are...
They're a protectorate of Portugal, so Portugal agrees to give them military protection in exchange probably for all that dairy that comes from all these cows, for starters. Haven't done a ton of research into what that exchange is and what those treaties and what those agreements look like, but usually, if a country agrees to provide protection, one, it's for a strategic place, which this would be, and also so that it can get some goods and services similar to like the mercantilist ways of back in the day.
And I don't think I mentioned it, but they became an autonomous region in the mid-1970s. I believe it was 1976, but don't quote me on that.
I think it was 77. I don't know.
Alright, something you guys should know about Felicia is she's not the most coordinated of people. Just about every vacation we ever go on, she always trips and falls somewhere. Let's see if I can get on video the time that it's going to happen during this vacation. You made it! As our tour guide warned us might happen, it's easy to get turned around here in these botanical gardens, but due to my superb navigational skills, I've found our way back to where we need to be.
A little easy there, Indiana Jones. The only other thing I wanted to mention is if you're used to a botanical gardens, like we think of them in the US, this is not that. This is a park that has a lot of really amazing greenery, but it's kind of like just native greenery in its native state, and it's mowed around it. So it's not really cultivated in a lot of ways. And if it's not native, it's something that was brought here a long time ago. Like we saw some tiger lilies, those kind of things, which we know are from, Eastern Asia, but they're here. They've been here a while. They're well established. So it's not really what we would think of in the US as a botanical garden. That having been said, if you're up for a great walk through some really beautiful areas, and it is a little bit treacherous at times, so you need to, be pretty steady on your feet to do some of the things that we just did, definitely would recommend this as one of those places.